The back-to-back massacres over the weekend have renewed the nationwide debate over gun control in America. This year alone, there have been at least 255 mass shootings. At least 273 people have been killed. More than 1,000 others have been hurt. CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys Anthony Salvanto is here to walk us through how the public views the issue of gun control. Anthony, thank you so much for being with us. You know, after tragedies take place, like what we just saw unfold over the weekend, we often hear a lot of debate over gun legislation. And I wonder, how does the passage of time actually affect the way that public opinion moves on this issue?
Yeah, and a lot of polls, too, are taken in the wake of tragedies. And then you might expect to see a rise in support for some of these measures, but then it's true that that does fade. Let me show you right now, most recent measure, it's not taken this week, but it's our most recent measure, has a 56% of people saying that they'd support stricter measures. Now, the devil's in the details there. We don't ask yet specifically what those measures are, and another third who say they'd keep them as they are. But to your point, Elaine, if we look at the numbers over time on this particular question, you can see points at which there were tragedies, and you can see that when we have things like Newtown and tragedies like at San Bernardino or Orlando, you can see some spikes in the percent of people who say, okay, stricter measures. But then sometimes that starts to drop off a little bit as it fades from the news coverage, or if political officials don't continue to press for that among the folks who want it. That's important to distinguish. Not everybody wants it.
Right. So one thing we know for sure is that many Americans feel incredibly frustrated on both sides of this gun debate. Help us understand why that is.
Yeah, that frustration comes in part, not just because people are polarized or some are polarized on the issue, but also because they see it as a multifaceted problem. And so when they see a politician of either stance on this saying, it's just this, or we've got to go after this, they kind of pull back and go, well, wait a second. So, for example, if we look at other things besides, in the view of some, the availability of guns, which they think is part of the problem, you see things like movies and video games. When we ask people, well, a third of people think that's partly to blame. You know, the irresponsibility of some gun owners. A lot of gun owners tell us, most gun owners tell us, that they feel responsibility is part of owning the weapon. Well, irresponsible gun owners, in their view, are part of the problem. So we see a large number for that. People feel mental illnesses, folks involved in illegal drug trades, and not enforcing laws that are currently on the books. That they blame too. So what you also see there is folks saying, especially Second Amendment supporters, saying it's not just guns. There's a lot going on, and so they get frustrated if the conversation turns to just one potential solution as opposed to many.
So there does seem to be, though, an area where there might be a couple of places for agreement when it comes to things like banning assault weapons and background checks. Help us understand what the polling here shows right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For background checks in particular, if we look at recent polling on that, you see that even across the usual partisan splits, you get a large number of Republicans, a large number of Democrats, and overall, in our more recent polling, looking for background checks to be one potential solution. Now, there are concerns, conservatives feeling like, well, they don't necessarily want a government database with everybody in it. So, again, the details matter here. But in broad support, that's one place. It's another part of frustration. People say, well, why can't they execute this properly? And then another place is the assault weapons ban. Now, again, details. Not everybody agrees on what an assault weapon is or what would be covered under any such ban. But if you look at this over time, again, we go back over time, in the 90s when there was an assault weapons ban, which, expired in the mid-zeros, but you look at it and it's fairly consistent. It's fairly consistent in polling terms. About 2/3 back in the 90s in CBS polling, and then it dipped a little bit, and then it's back up, at least in a different poll. This is the most recent Quinnipiac poll, at about 2/3. So again, so the details matter, but you do see people saying, okay, this is something that could be explored along with all these other possibilities.
We'll see what, if anything, happens as a result of some of these public opinions that you've laid out for us. All right, Anthony Salvanto, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.